not live, Brian. There we go.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. We are live, counting down. All right. We are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Flavor Talk with the Barbecue Pro Shop Factory team. My name is Ann Neal, aka Ms. Freak of Smoke Freaks Barbecue, and tonight I'll be your host of Flavor Talk. Joining me is our partner in flavor going all the way back to 2019, Jeff Belmonte, owner of Barbecue Pro Shop. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Not a lot. Excited to be here tonight. It's a big night.
It is. That's right. Tonight we are flipping the script because my usual co-host, Brian Neal, was just named State Cook-Off Association World Champion in Ribs in a perfect tie with Craig Sanders from Mississippi. And that means we are putting our very own Mr. Freak in the hot seat for tonight's Flavor Talk. Hey, Mr. Freak, how you doing tonight?
Well, and I'm doing amazing. I should say this is my first of 3 media appearances this week, so I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to scraping the rust off, polishing all my talking points, and getting to talk to you from all the way on the other side of the house over the magic of live streaming. Pretty wild.
I love it. We've got some folks just joining now. We'll hopefully get some more people coming on. And for those as you're joining, feel free to drop your name, any comments, any questions. We often put those up on the screen throughout the conversation. So
any questions, send them all. I'm an open book.
Yeah. So Brian, Mr. Freak, welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, I'm always excited to be on Flavor Talk, but I never really imagined that I'd be in the hot seat. So I guess you can say I'm cautiously optimistic to see what's going to happen here now that the tables are turned and you've got the reporter's pen in your hands. Hey, Ken, what's happening?
We'll go easy on you,
joining, fellow champ.
And you should be very, very nervous.
Yeah, well, we'll see what you got.
Oh, no, it's all good.
What do you got in mind for us tonight?
Yeah, we got a couple folks so far. So, all right, you're not really going to be in the hot seat. This is going to be great. You totally got this, Mr. Freak. So, in true Flavor Talk fashion, to kick things off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Freak, and how Smoke Freaks came to be?
Yeah, okay. Well, I grew up in Kansas City, which, as a lot of people know, is one of the more renowned places for barbecue in the country. I'm not going to say it's the best because, that's all subjective, but there's a strong barbecue tradition in Kansas City, and I grew up eating it a lot. My dad kind of fancied himself a backyard barbecuer, but honestly, by, today's standards, I look back and we had a lot of dry chicken in those days. He didn't know all the same tricks that we knew. But barbecue, I should say, was always in my blood. Got to cooking a little bit when I was in college, lived in an apartment. I'd burn my own chicken and dry it out on a charcoal grill in my early days. But it was just always something that was in the back of my mind that I always wanted to get better at. And someday when I had a chance, I wanted to be competitive at it. So I guess Smoke Freaks came to be because I always had that yearning in my heart, that interest in barbecue generally. And I knew one way or another I would find myself deeper into the craft.
Love it. So, Mr. Freak, what do you do for work or play when you're not out there barbecuing or cooking those steaks?
Yeah, well, okay. Well, barbecue is both work and play for me. It's been a business for us since 2015 or 2016 anyway. So almost 10 years of operating the things we do in barbecue and around barbecue as a business. But we also, that doesn't exactly pay all the bills and the mortgages, but it does make it possible for us to keep on doing this really expensive habit/hobby. But when I'm not doing that, I'm primarily working on our floor coating business. We do the pretty speckled garage floor coatings, not so much in Chicagoland, but we're actually south in Houston, Dallas, and the Alabama coast. So I'm big in the sales and marketing and operations side of that business, and it keeps me busy in the day and keeps me awake at night.
All right. Mr. Freak, favorite rib, spares or baby backs?
Oh man, we're starting with lightning round. Well, I'm going to say favorite spares. What I'm going to cook depends. If it's for a KCBS competition or a run-of-the-mill competition, I'm definitely cooking spares. But if it's MBN or if I'm cooking for Chicago neighbors, I'm probably going for baby backs because that's what they expect. And my favorite ribs are whichever one makes people smile who are eating them. So how about that for a diplomatic answer?
That's a great answer.
Miss Freak would be proud of that one.
I'm super proud of that answer. All right. I'm a little afraid maybe to ask this next question, but we got to know. I don't think I know this. What is your very first barbecue memory of me, your dearly beloved Ms. Freak wife and partner in life and barbecue?
Oh, wow. My very first. Okay. I can say I've got my earliest and then I've got my favorite. Can I do both?
Okay, I suppose you can.
All right. Earliest memory of you barbecue related was you telling me that I'm not really into smoked meat. That was, I think, am I quoting you right? Is that what you said?
I think that was
not really fond of smoked meat. I don't know. It was something like that.
I think that was an exact quote. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I take that to mean in retrospect that my Q game wasn't very good at that point in my progression, and I needed to step it up. And so I did. So we did, which brings me to my favorite barbecue memory of you, Ms. Freak. And that was your very first chicken call at a big KCBS event, and you running down the aisle and jumping up and down. And I think you're wearing your wolf hat even. And yeah, I'll never forget that. It was amazing. It was just such a pure moment of joy and happiness that, barbecue has a way of delivering to people.
Well said. I think I scared some people that particular day.
But you were wearing a wolf hat.
It was very, very
running. You were running and howling, and there's a lot of people at this event. This was at Green Bay Lambeau Field, so we had a big section of parking lot. This was a Tim Shop event, and he's a great promoter up north. And to me, this is one of the crown jewel events of Wisconsin of that time frame. So, man, it was the biggest event we'd been in, and there were just tons of people. We had really still no idea what we were doing. We'd only done 2 or 3 of these things for total greenhorns. But hey, you got a big call at a big event, and I'll never forget it.
Very cool. All right. So you've kind of gone back in time a little bit to that particular event. I want to go all the way back to the very, very, very beginning of your rib journey, which was the beginning of Smoke Freaks. So June 2014, Meat on Milwaukee contest in Chicago, our neighborhood in Chicago at the time. We've got a couple photos that Jeff is going to put on the screen. This is going to be 1 and 2. And Mr. Freak, tell me about Meat on Milwaukee. What do you remember most about that day?
All right. Well, yeah, Meat on Milwaukee. Well, first of all, I'll just set a little context here. So I assume that we're not regulated by any federal agencies. I can say shit canned, right? I'd just been shit canned from my job. And I'd had this job for a long time. It was kind of a negotiated canning. So at any rate, I had some things to prove in life as I was exiting that. And I also had some direction to find for myself. So it was really one of the most magical times in my life in that I literally had nothing to do every morning at 6:30, 7 o'clock when I got up. Ann was still working. I'm unemployed. And I, decided I'm going to pursue this passion that I've had behind me all this time of wanting to get deeper into barbecue. So, I had really no idea where to start, but I did live in Chicago and all kinds of great stuff gets thrown away in the alleys of Chicago. So I had no problem getting my hands on a couple of clunker pits, had an old 18-inch WSM, got myself another one, and and decided to enter a barbecue competition. This was all within like 2 months of my last day working at my last corporate job. So at any rate, I've got 2 months to basically learn how to cook barbecue. And that's really what I did for 2 straight months. I cooked almost every single day something: ribs, chicken, I'm making briskets, pork shoulders, just whatever I could get my hands on. I didn't really know how to pick things at that point. I'm smoking things that had no business being smoked, like steaks, you name it. I'm just playing around and trying to learn how meat works over live fire in a smoking contest. So flash forward 2 whole months, and we've entered this contest down the street from our house.
You've entered this contest.
I've entered this.
You've entered us in this contest.
Oh, is that how it went? Okay, I think you're right. You were at work, and I heard about it, and I signed up to compete in our very first contest. And I don't know, I think there was maybe 15 teams. It was very much a neighborhood, backyard kind of thing. Most folks lived within probably a 1 mile radius, maybe a couple people who had once lived in the neighborhood and had moved out to suburbs or whatever. But I know this for sure. We showed up, and every single person there knew way more, or at least looked like they knew way more about what they were doing than we did. I mean, there was one team that had like 20 trophies set up in their little area. And I'm immediately thinking, oh my God, we're totally outclassed. I mean, I don't even know how to put this pop-up up. But I'll put the pop-up up. We did. We got the thing up, and probably took us 15 minutes to get the thing up, and then 5 minutes, as I recall, to completely lose the thing. So what I'm talking about is wind comes up, pop up, gone. 5 minutes into the event. So now, man, I'm getting some weird feedback. Are you guys hearing that?
I can hear you okay.
Okay, cool. So 5 minutes in, pop-up's gone. I'm already feeling like, man, we don't know what we're doing and look like a bunch of idiots. And now pop-up has practically wiped out 3 other teams as it tumbled down the street like a tumbleweed. And we've got nothing to protect us from the sun. Okay, whatever. We're going to try and make a go at this. So I don't know what happened next. I get my pit running. I've got my plan. I'm going to cook my ribs at 3-2-1 method I'd read about on the internet. It was going to take about almost 6 hours, basically, just like it suggests. But I could not get this thing to run, my pit, that is, at under 350 degrees because it's so windy and this pit is so drafty. And I didn't have any idea how to manage it. Now today, you could give me that exact same pit and put me in a windstorm and a blizzard, and I'd figure out how to cook through it. But at that point, absolutely clueless. So what was I doing? Exactly the wrong thing. Opening the lid, opening the charcoal door, trying to staring at the coals, hoping they'll go get cooler somehow. And meanwhile, the pit's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And I'm faced with a decision, should we just get the heck out of here? And as I recall, I was ready to fold the whole thing up and go home because there was just no way I was going to be able to cook ribs at 380 degrees or whatever the smoker was running at.
I remember that. I think you said, let's get out of here. We really have no business being here. We don't have a pop-up. We don't know what we're doing. And I remember thinking at that moment, I think these were my words, no, we are going to finish what we started. Whatever that means, we're here. We dragged all this crap from our home, like 1 block, but it was a lot of crap. Coolers and totes goes back to this very day. And we got to finish what we started. So, Mr. Freak, what happened?
It's true. It was probably your first of many competition rally speeches you've given me over the next 10 years. When things were looking grim, you always have a way of pulling us up by our bootstraps. And that's really what we did this day. We shook it off and we figured out on the fly how to cook ribs hot and fast. So I was smart enough to know it wasn't going to take 6 hours to cook these ribs at 350 degrees or whatever the pit was running. And I didn't know how to make the pit cool off. I'd closed all the vents and it's still just raging. So we cooked those things at it was probably around 350 or 325 by the time we put meat in the smoker. But hey, it's settled in right around 325. So we cooked those suckers in about 2.5 hours, and we've been cooking hot and fast ever since, because it turned out it was our day. Through absolute complete dumb luck, we managed to win this rib competition that we had no business winning. Certainly not against teams that actually had done this stuff before and probably knew how to cook some ribs. But we picked the right ones. We put them in our turn-in boxes. And I don't know, can you go back one frame? One of those pictures was just kind of showed how crazy this competition was. All right, the one on the right, there is me carrying our entries to judging. We had to build 5 separate turn-in boxes and put at least one rib in each turn-in box. So, hey, I was going to overachieve. I put 2 ribs in each turn-in box, and we sent 5 to the judges. Why we put them in a tote for us to carry, I really have no idea. In retrospect, that's absolutely insane. As is the shirt I'm wearing. I mean, obviously, I've never been to a barbecue competition. Look at what I'm wearing. Oh, my God. That shirt probably has barbecue stains from that day on and forevermore. And it was a nice shirt.
I mean, how else are you going to carry 5 entry boxes?
I mean, yeah, that was crazy. 5
That's actually a pretty good one.
This is 2014. I mean, pre-COVID, there was no reason to have 5 turn-in boxes. Other than, I guess I wasn't the only one who didn't know what I was doing. The organizers didn't either. They made us build 5 turn-in boxes.
So, Mr. Freak, when did you realize that what started as this fun backyard hobby that you kind of got ourselves into with some initial success was turning into something more serious?
Oh, man. It was almost immediate. Probably that day, they hand you a trophy, they say you're a winner, and this is how so many of us get into competition barbecue is we enter some piddly little contest and do well or win it, and then hey, guess what? For the next 10 years, you're going to be driving around cooking barbecue in parking lots. And, I've heard that story probably 100 times, and it's a cliche because it's true. That's how so many of us get hooked into it. And, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. If the pop-up had blown down the street and we'd have finished DAL, that's dead ass last, then, would we have gone back for more? Maybe not. Maybe we would have taken up fishing or, I don't know, gardening or there's probably reading. There's probably lots of valuable things.
Well, suffice
I do read. It's not like I don't read, but
our lives certainly changed that day. And you talked about, going on to cook, barbecue in various parking lots and all that. So tell us about some of those other early days after that first.
Yeah. Okay. So this is definitely the early days. I can see by both the team lineup and the pit lineup. So, all right, let's talk about the one on the left. So I want to say that is probably, oh gosh, somewhere up north. What was that, Ann? Was that Lamb's Farm?
Union Grove.
Union Grove. Oh my God, our first appearance at Union Grove. That's amazing. All right, so what do we got for smokers? I see our backyard Jambo. We had just got that a couple of months before. I actually bought it over the phone while I was working in Switzerland, but it came up on Facebook, some guy in Illinois, and I messaged him. I'm like, I'll take it. But I'm not going to be home for 2 weeks. You got to hold on to it. Still have that pit. I'm keeping that one forever. As you can see, we got a rented U-Haul. That was one of the things we had to kind of endure in the early days. We had a little Subaru Forester and a motorcycle, so the only way we're competing was by renting equipment. Those 2 pop-ups, probably the best investments that we made in terms of, non-smokers. Those 2 pop-ups are still going strong. In fact, one of them went down to Worlds with us. The canopy's been replaced, but those steel canopies by Caravan, I'm just going to give them a plug. They never gave me anything, but except a whole lot of years out of those 2 canopies, and they've been through some crazy windstorms, 50 miles an hour. It laughs at that, no problem. What else? That red drum smoker. I believe you gave me that for Valentine's Day. Is that right?
I sure did. Her name's Ruby.
That was Ruby. Yeah, I don't know where Ruby came from, but Ruby was already used when we got it. It was set up as a rib smoker in the traditional sense, meaning that thing did not want to run more than 225. It just wasn't made for it. It had tiny little intakes and a not very big exhaust. So for me to cook, the way I'd learned to by this point at 300 degrees, basically I had to run it with the lid cracked open. That was Ruby. Next to that, we got a Gateway drum smoker. That was our original competition drum smoker. And I don't know, didn't last long. That one's cooking up in Wisconsin nowadays. Just didn't stick for whatever reason. And Ruby, I believe, also moved on to someone in the Chicagoland area. And on the right, that must be the Windy City Barbecue Classic. In my opinion, the greatest barbecue event that ever happened in Chicago. I mean, it was just such a cool idea that this guy had, Jared, to let's have a competition at Soldier Field. And so we did. The first year we entered and did pretty darn well. I think we ended up fourth there with had a couple vegans on the team, some neighbors, a tall guy for blocking and tackling. And, we did all right for a bunch of people who still didn't really know what we were doing. But yeah, those were the early days, and I loved every minute of it. I wouldn't change a thing because every event, every practice, every single time I cooked, I knew I was getting better. I knew we were getting better. We were just learning so much so fast, as you do when you throw yourself into something new. So yeah, those salad days of barbecue, I will definitely never forget them. Friendships made, lifetimes changed, and a whole new trajectory.
So, Mr. Freak, would you say that ribs are your specialty out of all?
Wow.
Cooked and you've cooked?
Ribs, are they my specialty? I'm going to say that ribs are probably the thing that I can do the best, most consistently on any piece of equipment. Are they my specialty? I don't know. Barbecue's my specialty. Live fire cooking's my specialty. You give me a piece of meat, I want to cook it.
Well, this morning I did some legwork going all the way back to 2014, and I pulled your rib stats from every single event that you have ever competed in. Are you ready to take a look?
All right. That's a lot of stats. Let's see.
All right.
Okay, what do we have here? KCBS, that's where we kind of spent most of our time, as you can see, 78 appearances. Man, all right. We walked a lot in KCBS and ribs, I guess. That's things like what? The Windy City Barbecue Classic.
Local, non-sanctioned, competitor series versus master series. Yeah.
Hey, God bless the others. We've done pretty well at those. SCA, that's been more recent. Just the last couple of years, we've been cooking ribs in the SCA format, but we've done pretty well there. Obviously, only one win, but hey, that was a big one just a couple of weeks ago. And MBN has probably been the most challenging and in some ways the most interesting of the formats that we've cooked in. We've only got to do it a couple of times for ribs, just kind of on the back end of doing whole hog. But wow, that will really put your cooking skills to the test because you've got to cook 2 rounds of these things on the same day, often while you're doing 4 or 5 or 6 other things. So, yeah, I guess those are some pretty good stats. I would not have guessed our walk percentage, and I'm not going to say mine because you were a part of 99% of these cooks or so, almost that, all but maybe 2 or 3. Man, we walked a lot, 63% of the time. So I'm going to say ribs must be our specialty because I don't think we walk that much in any other category. I know you were a heck of a chicken cook, but I know, for example, I never once won a brisket category. Never once. I think I went second place like 8 times in a row, had some scores that were an appearance away from being perfect. but never managed to win in brisket. So ribs, hey, I love them.
Ribs. Now,
I'm going to cook more ribs.
I think we're going to be cooking more ribs, and I think that is, quite a track record. And I'd love to hear about some of the moments that you remember most from some of these career stats. And we've got some additional imagery to put here on the screen from
all right. Well,
additional rib moments.
All right. Well, that'll definitely help me remember some. But all right, right off the bat, the one on the left, that would be Winthrop Harbor 2017, our first Grand Championship. And yeah, I think we had 3 first places that day in ribs, chicken, and pork. Pork was a real shocker because,
because pork
it just wasn't on brand for us at the time.
Just pork.
So yeah, definitely a big day. I think the main thing I remember about the rib cook is what a disaster it almost was. Because if I remember correctly, we were about 15 or 20 minutes into the cook. The ribs are in the smoker. I'm dancing or something. Oh, I was getting ready to do a radio interview with somebody. And you're like, Mr. Freak, why is Red Rum closed? I'm like, what do you mean closed? It's not closed. We're cooking ribs. And I look over, and sure enough, all the vents are closed on this.
The intake was closed. The exhaust was closed. I'm like,
yeah.
OMG, because our schedule is boom, 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 boom. If you know us, we're very specific.
Yeah, so that's the day that I learned that you can close the vents on a Hunsaker smoker for 15 minutes. At that point, it had been going for an hour, so it was good and going. And then if you open those things up completely and open the lid, it will reignite itself. Probably not the ideal cook, but apparently it all worked out. What else we got? The very next weekend, Arthur, Illinois, and our second Grand Championship. That's probably when I thought, oh, wow, we actually might have a future in this thing. And in some ways, I think it was when I decided, now we can start to have more fun. We can take our foot off the gas. But another great day for ribs. And then next week to that, we have Murfreesboro. I'm going to say probably 2018 and my first perfect score in ribs at one of my favorite places to cook them with some of my favorite people in the world. There's you, Amy Mills, and for a long, long time, we've cooked down there next to, against, and even with Steamboat Barbecue. It's really where we got to know those guys and became great friends. So definitely some of my favorite rib cooks. Others that I remember, I'm guessing you won't have pictures of, is Madison, Indiana, one of the most beautiful places you could ever have a barbecue competition. Way, way down south on, what is that, the Ohio River, I want to say. You're right across from looking at Kentucky, and it's just a super cool little town. And we've done really, really well in ribs there. What else we got? More Murfreesboro, another great weekend. That weekend, I recall, that's the one on the right, we actually were crazy enough to enter every category. This was with Steamboat. We entered every category there was to cook. So we're doing KCBS. We're doing all 3 things in NBN. We did all the ancillaries. But on the main cooking day, I was responsible for all the ribs. So we had 5 different drum smokers going, every Hunsaker that we own. We brought in our buddy Dan to help us run the things because there was just no possible way to cook. We were cooking 3 different rounds of ribs that all were in different stages of completion at different times. So probably the most complicated cook that we've ever done because everything had to be perfect. You had 2 NBN rounds, and even for the second ones to count, the first have to be perfect, plus KCBS. We ended up placing in everything that we entered that day, I think. First place KCBS ribs, got my first time as a MBN finalist in ribs and had to figure out on the fly, how are we going to do a ribs presentation? Hadn't even thought about it beforehand. I was just focused on cooking the things, and all of a sudden it's like, oh man, now, number one, you're in finals, and it's not for about 2 hours later than you thought. So these ribs you're in the middle of cooking, they're going to be awful unless you figure something out. Number two, you got to give a whole presentation about it. So it was an interesting afternoon.
It was. All right. Fast forward to March 2025, the SCA World Championships. This was going to be the very first competition of the year for both of us. Not really a situation you want to find yourself in. At least I don't. I don't like Worlds to be the first comp out of the gate for the year. It turns out that Mr. Freak and I had both qualified to cook in the steak semifinals, excuse me. We were going back to Texas for our 4th appearance at Worlds. And this particular year, a World Championships in ribs was added. And do you remember, Mr. Freak, when you saw that there was a World Championship, what you were thinking when you saw that?
Oh, I was super stoked. I mean, they'd kind of done a warm-up the year before, but it really wasn't a championship format. It was just a big rib competition. There wasn't any play-in aspect or a qualifying round or anything like that. But we had entered and done pretty well. Actually, we walked twice at that one, even though it was only entered once. Long story. But yeah, I was stoked because hey, another shot at a world championship. Number one, we're going to drive 800 or 900 miles to cook a steak in a parking lot. If I can cook ribs too, I mean, heck, I'm definitely better at ribs than steak. I don't know if it's my specialty, but I'm better at it than steak. So yeah, count me in. Ribs World Championship. Let's go.
And for people that know us, they know that us freaks are very focused about being focused on our cook, on all aspects of our cook. Some of us freaks maybe a little bit more than others. So did you have a thought about adding ribs on top of steak?
So, I mean, you know me. I love big events. The bigger the event, the better. The more excited I am, the more relaxed I am in some ways. I love big events. So, hey, we're going to do 2 things, fine. 3 things, great. I mean, I want to cook everything that we can possibly cook because I know when the time comes, we're going to have that focus. We're going to be on and it's going to come together. We're going to have a shot at doing something incredible. And, you just don't get to take that many shots. So I want all of them I can get.
So for those on the Flavor Talk that might not be familiar, in SCA events, cooks cook as individuals, not as a team. So that means Mr. Freak and I were both entered in rib primaries, the preliminaries and primaries, and we ended up cooking in different groups. Brian's rib prelim was turned in 1 hour before mine. You were blue and I was green or something like that. So what was that like, literally cooking side by side with me? You had your pit, I had mine. What was that like?
Yeah, we've really only done this maybe 2 or 3 times before where we've competed against each other in ribs. And, it's always interesting because obviously we know everything about the cooks that we've done together. And that's what, 90 of them, according to your little stat sheet, or close to 90 of them. So, there's the only real mystery here is who's gonna focus the hardest and get luckiest and come out on top. I love every chance I get to compete against you, but I'm always rooting for you. And I know you like to beat me. I don't feel quite as strongly as you do. If you best me on any given day, that's totally cool. I would have been just as happy for you to be rib champion of SCA World Finals than me.
Oh. Well, I'll tell you, everything I know about ribs, I learned from you. And everything I know about pork, I learned from J-Bob from Steamboat. So Mr. Freak, in that preliminary cook, was there a moment when you thought, I might have something special here?
Oh, the world's cook?
No, for the qualifying round.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think that moment was about a month before we even left when we picked up the ribs that we get our ribs from Wichita Packing. No secret there. We've talked about it for years, but this box, for whatever reason, it just had halos coming off of them. Every single one of these things. we bought 2 boxes because we wanted to make sure we had plenty of ribs to mess with. And one thing I like to do is have all the ribs I'm cooking from the same side of the hog. That's way if I'm, using 2 different racks, they're going to lay exactly the same way, and I don't have to figure out how to Jenga them into the box. So I would say that was the moment where, I really felt confident going into this. We did 1 practice going in. We hadn't cooked any ribs at all since probably last October, Murfreesboro, I guess, last fall. We hadn't cooked any ribs. We just been focused on steak, Thanksgiving turkeys, Christmas prime ribs, all the other things you do in the winter besides competing. We're definitely not the type at this point in our life where we're going to drive through the snow to go compete somewhere in the middle of winter. But we did do 1 practice cook, and we invited some of our friends from the shop down the street. They work on our vehicles, keep us tip top, make sure we can get to and from where we're going. And they came over to evaluate 3 different rib profiles that we were considering. So that was probably the moment where I was feeling super confident because we cooked 6 racks and they all cooked perfect. They were out of the same batch we were going to take. I'm like, okay, we've got the right product. We just got to pick the right recipe, hit the right judges, and run our program. And one of us has got a shot.
And I'll add on top of that, when you saw the ribs, you were feeling, something. And I'll add that going into the event, I knew there was going to be something special because it was a full moon. And as weird and freaky as that may sound, many of our best barbecue moments have happened under a full moon. I like to say, don't underestimate the power of a full moon when the wolf is your spirit animal. So
it's definitely true.
It's true.
I would guess out of the wins, if half of them weren't under a full moon, I'd be shocked.
Yeah. And, I think I mentioned you were in the blue B group. I was in green A or something. When they called the top 10 for ribs in your group, you were 4th making rib finals. And I was so, so excited for you. And then next was my group. I got 7th. It was quite a moment for me personally. It was the first time,
walk at Worlds.
Ever making finals at Worlds. And that was on top of the knowledge that both freaks were going to be in a cook-off. So that to me is just crazy. Here we are. You can talk a little bit about that. And I want to know, Brian, you talked about, freak versus freak and all that. There was going to be a real freak versus freak in the rib finals against each other and all those other folks. What was that like? What was your mindset going into that cook? Going into
finals? All right, here we are. It's the actual throwdown.
Yeah, the different.
What I remember most about that day was just a sense of calmness, like almost serenity. I was just very chill all day.
Yeah.
And probably because I only had one thing to do, cook some ribs. You're the one who had to do all this other stuff. Go pick a steak, pick 2 steaks, trim your steaks, get all that stuff ready. And at this point, we'd been through qualifying, and qualifying was pretty challenging as a cook day. I think that picture you have there is from that day. So
yeah.
So let me give you a little context for those listening. It was crazy windy on Friday, qualifying day. The wind's blowing, I don't know, gusting up to 50 miles an hour, and it's a dust storm. It's just gross. Everything that's outside is getting covered with a layer of dust constantly. And by the end of the day, your lungs literally hurt from it. So basically I'm worried about 2 things: my pop-up not blowing away, because, we learned that lesson the hard way, never lost another one since. And number 2, I just want my pits to run as well as they possibly can. So basically we were in a little wind tunnel between our trailer and our neighbors. It was exactly 10 feet 1 inch wide, so our pop-up just barely fits. But we tied it down to the pickup truck. We had 260 pounds of weights and basically built a wall out of oil pans that we carry around in our wolf wagon. So oil pans. I'm talking about the things people used to put under their cars back in the 80s when cars used to leak oil. They're hard to find now, these big metal aluminum drip pans. But at one point at some competition where it was very, very squishy, let's just say, I had bought 4 of these things for my pits to sit on to keep them from sinking in the mud. And we've carried them around ever since. On this particular day, they were the perfect wind block. So barbecue lesson number 1 or 6 or 12 is be prepared for anything, be prepared to do what you got to do to make your equipment run the way it needs to if the weather goes south on you. Definitely, I would say that's one of our advantages when it comes to cooking in general, but especially cooking ribs on a Hunsaker. We probably cooked ribs more than any other protein. When we were competing in KCBS, we'd cook 4, 5, sometimes even 6 racks of ribs. We're only cooking 1 brisket. I've maybe cooked 100 briskets in my life, but I'm sure I've cooked 1,000 plus racks of ribs over the years and done it in all kind of weather. So be confident in your equipment and know how to make it run.
And I think I know the answer to this, but did everything go exactly as planned with the cook?
What? Practice cook?
Nope, rib finals.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's always got to be something that goes wrong. In this particular case, this wasn't even a self-inflicted error. This is crazy. This was a Ms. Freak inflicted error because Detail Freak over there, she rarely makes mistakes. However, we're, I think, 10 minutes ready from the point where we got to wrap our ribs, pull them off. We pull them off the pit. We wrap them up, add all the magical stuff that, gives them that championship flavor. Everybody in competition wraps. So we're about to do this. And one of our ingredients is Kerrygold butter. And
unsalted,
always unsalted. And I don't know, you'll have to say what happened. I was out minding my pit, so I don't know. All I know is you come walking out with a paper plate with very frozen looking pieces of butter on it.
Yeah, the butter was not room temp or close to it. It was straight out of the fridge, and you were freaking out. It was kind of funny. I thought you were like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, "All right, so we'll put it in the sun. It might not be room temperature, but it'll be soft. It'll be fine. The butter is not going to mess up the cook." I was very calm. And again, this is a moment of like role reversal, which was just so crazy. And yeah, I remember it taking a bit of extra time to figure out timing. Like you said, we both were in the rib finals. This is the same day. I had also made steak finals. So that Sunday, that day of finals was pretty busy. And you were uber focused because all you had to worry about was ribs. And I remember a lot of craziness around the mess that I had made around steak. We had to really work hard to divvy up counter space. I needed my steak space. I needed my rib space. You needed yours. And
yeah, it all worked out pretty well. I think it was for the best that I wasn't cooking steak too. I think that probably would have made it a little bit more challenging. But I got to say, the people at SCA, they really understand how these things are cooked. And they did a fantastic job with the turn-in timelines to make it possible for, if somebody wanted to and was qualified for all of the finals, ancillary and ribs and steak, you certainly could pull that off. I mean, it'd be a hectic day for sure, but it could be done. And, if you're really hardcore, you could enter the TMS Steak Classic too. And I don't think anybody did all 3 finals. I don't think, did anyone qualify for all 3?
I believe so. Yeah. A small number.
Yeah.
A small number. Yeah.
Yeah. That's hardcore, man. But the way they set it up, it's possible. And I got to give props to, Ken and Brett and Michelle and everybody at SCA for putting on a really great event that is made for cooks. Not every event puts the cooks front and center.
There's one of them.
Yeah, there's one of the people.
There's one of them. Elizabeth. Congratulations, Elizabeth. It was hectic, right?
Yeah. But, SCA does a great job. That's my point.
That's right. So, Mr. Freak, I'd like to keep this conversation moving. I'd like to talk about the arsenal that helped to fuel the cook. So you talked about this a little bit. Let's talk about the smokers that were at play.
All right. Yeah. So those are our original Hunsaker drums. We bought these back in 2016. They have, between the two of them, cooked almost all of the ribs that were listed in those stat sheets because, these are just, especially the red one. That's Red Drum. She was the designated pit for ribs in KCBS. But once we wrap them, we usually split them across two pits just because we found they cooked a little more perfectly if you're not crabbing them on the grates. So those two have been all around the world. Pam the Alphabet was Alpha Pit. That's the one by Miss Freak there. I basically built her myself. She showed up via UPS with a huge dent in the side, and the remedy for that was Mark sent me a brand new drum with all the holes drilled in it, and I took all the parts off the old one and transplanted them into the new one. So Pam the Alphabet, that's my forever pit. She'll be with you.
Wow, Elizabeth, look at this comment. Watched your YouTube and bought one last week. What are you going to do?
They are amazing smokers, Elizabeth. And if you ever want to know there's a great Facebook group, Friends of Hunsaker Smokers, or hey, you know us, give us a call. We'll tell you all we know.
Totally.
All right, what else you got, Ms. Freak?
I got proteins. They're pictured in this photo as well. We've talked a little bit about this, how important Wichita packing has been to the rib game over the years.
All right. So no disrespect to any rib packer out there, but for the most part, ribs is ribs. I mean, you get into some of your heritage breeds and all of that, but ribs in the United States are a commodity. They're sold by the lot. You can go on ag radio and hear all about it. Same as pork bellies. And what Wichita packing does really, really well, in my opinion, is number one, they work with really, really good suppliers that have a designated feeding and raising and breeding program that meets Wichita's specifications. So it's a very, very consistent product that they get, even though they're not coming from one specific farm in one specific place. That is just not the way the pork market works at all. The other thing that Wichita does that is really especially valuable to me as a rib cook, to anybody who caters, anybody who has a restaurant, and frankly, they're a wholesaler. That's who they focus on, is restaurants and big accounts that buy pallets, that buy tons, that buy trucks full of ribs or other pork products. But what they do that really helps me as a competition cook is they weight grade the ribs. So when I'm getting a rack of ribs from Wichita, or obviously they don't sell them by the rack, I got to buy a couple cases or they don't even want to talk to you. But, I get a couple of cases, they're all the same weight. I prefer a 2.75 and down, is what it's called. Some other guys like a bigger one, 3 to 3.5. And that just refers to the average weight of the rack once it's been trimmed out, which they do on site. They cut them into St. Louis spares and cut a lot of the junk off of them. That's what they weigh. And so consistency is king in competition barbecue. If I know I'm cooking the same size of ribs, I know exactly how long my cook is going to take, as long as I run my equipment right. And some of the hardest cooks I've ever had is when I'm cooking other people's stuff. Like my buddy Steve, he's brought me some of the most beautiful ribs I've ever seen, like pure hybrid Duroc or pure Duroc. And, I had a hard time cooking them because they were huge. There you go, 3.75. So that's a pound, almost a pound and a half heavier than what I'm used to cooking. And wasn't my best rib cook, I will say that. But if that's what I cooked every weekend, and I think that's what he's cooking now, you'd learn what you're doing. Some guys prefer a much, much meatier rib. I just like the small ones. That's what I've always been about, is they're definitely smaller on the small side. And in fact, our turn-in box at Worlds, both for prelims and finals, I put 10 bones in the box. Why not? There's no kale allowed. I got to fill that thing up.
You put 10 in. Ribs. You put 10 bones in, and I put 9
Yeah, those were two firsts for us. We've never done more than 8 before. I love a 7-bone box. 3 on top of 4 was kind of my contrarian go-to turn-in box back in the KCBS format. But hey, I'm a strong new believer. 10 bones whenever possible.
All right, Mr. Freak, we have talked about equipment. We have talked about those beautiful proteins. And you know what that means we're going to talk about next?
No idea.
Flavor.
Oh, yeah. Well, flavor is pretty important.
Flavor talk.
Flavor talk.
Got to talk about some flavor. So, Mr. Freak, how would you describe your flavor profile for ribs?
Well, a few different things. One, it's definitely sweet. I've always liked making a sweeter profile than savory when it comes to ribs. One reason is, it's a pretty small cut of meat. It doesn't handle a whole lot of salt very well. And, but you need salt. You need to get salt into any barbecue you're cooking, in my opinion. And because ribs have a tendency to really exacerbate the saltiness, I go into a very, very sweet profile, which just eliminates any risk somebody's going to taste these and go, I'm too salty. So for one thing, very sweet. The other thing, consistent. Our profile's been pretty consistent since, well, for sure 2019. That's when we got together with Jeff and we really retooled all of our flavors to go with the Barbecue Pro Shop lineup. It was kind of a rebuilding year for that. Up until that, as I recall, and you'll have a stronger memory of this than me since you did a lot of it, we were making a lot of our own rubs.
I was making a lot of our rubs.
Yeah, you were we were making our own base rubs. I know we were using commercial. One that goes back almost forever is Cimarron Docks. We've used that on almost every single rack of ribs we've ever turned in. I think even going all the way back to that very first comp. Why? Because when I didn't know anything and I went on the internet, that was one of the ones everybody talked about. It's truly an OG rub of especially Midwest competition cooking. Pretty much everyone who's competed in the Midwest has used it. Certainly every judge has had pounds and pounds of it by now because almost everyone uses it in some way or another. Maybe it's mixed with something else before it goes into a bottle. Maybe it's mixed with something else after, but a lot of people like that Simdocs.
And here they are.
Yeah, so that's what we turned in. Not the ones on the left. Those were obviously testers. Huge props to Ms. Freak. She has been our not just our rib taste tester, but the tester for Smoke Freaks Barbecue all the way back to the beginning. She's just got a very, very consistent palate, and she's not one to kid me or herself or anything else. If it's not the best, it doesn't get a good score from her. But on this particular day, it was pretty amazing, really both days. Every rack we cooked but one, you're just like, top score.
You asked me, what do I think about the racks you were cooking? I'm like, I gave you my thoughts, and I scored my own.
In the end, we had the extreme luxury, and this hardly ever happens. Usually you put in the box whatever you think is the best, so the ones that cook the best, they're the most tender. In this particular day, I got to screw around with 3 racks of ribs and decide, which one should go on the top? Which one should go on the bottom? Is this rack too pretty? Is this rack too ugly? And got to spend 5 minutes just futzing around with which 2 out of 3 were going to go in there. And there's the final result. It's a pretty box. Pretty ones. No sauce.
Yeah, you picked
second year in a row. We went commando with our ribs at SCA, no sauce. I don't know why. In KCBS, we did sauce our stuff. Lots of Blues Hog, obviously. You can never go wrong with that. But yeah, for whatever reason, we just started, when we started last year doing SCA ribs, we're like, let's just send them dry. So I'm looking forward to this Rib Cook-Off Association. It's a relatively new format that some of our buddies are in. They're kind of twisting our arms saying, come try it out. But they've got an event in a couple weeks up in Franklin, Wisconsin, where there's 2 flights of ribs. You can turn them in dry, you can turn them in wet. So I'm going dry. Miss Freak's going to enter wet ribs, and we're going to check him out.
All right, Mr. Freak. So walk us through that moment of truth. We're getting close on time here. They called your number as world champion. They called 2 numbers for world champion in that perfect tie. How did you feel about that? What was going through your mind at that time?
All right. Well, like I said, I was calm all day, and that includes awards, and that includes when they've counted all the way down to number 3, and my ticket still hasn't come up. And that doesn't happen often. You know, there's plenty of times where you're out cooking and you're hoping for a high call. You know, you didn't have the best stuff, or at least if you're being honest with yourself, you know, are these the best we've ever made? No. Are they good? Sure. Everybody has good food at a barbecue contest. That's the nature of it. Bunch of pro cooks. But on this particular day, I knew I had sent a great box, and I guarantee Leona, who's the person who accepted my rib box both days, she saw the confidence, because I was a little bit cocky. I'm usually pretty humble. I'm pretty quiet, especially at turn in. I'm just trying to get in, get out, get back to the trailer and start cleaning up. But on that particular day, I'm like, Leona, first of all, you need to know these are heavy. You might need to warn the person who's going to carry them. These are heavy. And she's like, I'm like, do you want to see them? I open them up, look. She's just like, oh, good luck, Brian. Anyway, I know she was impressed. I could tell.
And boom.
Yeah, so we're counting down. We get to the end, you know, and he says it stopped. It stopped after 3rd place, and there was a big pause, and he's like, all right, so we had this pause because what we have here is, for the 2nd time in SCA history, a perfect tie for the championship. Hooray. And I'm thinking, for a brief second, maybe it's both of us. Maybe it's you, maybe it's me, maybe it's both of us. But I had a pretty good feeling that one of us at least was going to make it up there, just because everything had gone so right the whole week. It just felt, you know, it felt magic going into it. And then all of a sudden it was slow motion. You know, they called that first number. It was mine. We were way, way, way in the back, just because that's the way we've always been. I was the back of the bus kid, back of the classroom kid. So I like to sit at the back of awards, and, you know, that way you can survey the whole landscape in front of you. So the downside is, by the time I got myself up onto the stage, my co-champion, Craig, he'd already been up there 5 minutes by this point. They've got his name on the check. He's got the sign that says world champion. He's mugging for all the pictures, and he's not letting go of any of that stuff. He's like, I'm taking this. So they gave me a blank check that somebody graciously photoshopped for us so that we could have something on stage. And Craig let me hold his sign for a minute. But rumor has it, Ken, this awesome guy on the right, is getting me my very own sign, just like that one. My very own check and my very own world champion ring. And I have to say that what more could somebody in this game want? That's why we do it. You know, realistically, did I ever think I'd win a world championship? I knew I had it in me, but did I think it'd happen? Well, it's not entirely up to me. You know, it takes a lot of luck at the end of the day to be the last one on stage. It just does. You have to have the right judges and the right day at the right time, and whatever they tasted right before you isn't clashing with what you're doing. And that's just the way it is. You're up against other champions, almost every single one of them. So, you know, comes down to luck. And the guy on the left, I'll just mention, that is the world famous Jim Compart. He's a heck of a rib guy himself. You know, known around the world, especially in the Midwest barbecue scene, as one of the best sources for ribs out there. Thanks to Jim, who sponsored this whole shindig down there for the rib cook.
So a couple of other champions to name. Brian talked about ribs. Congratulations to the SCA Ancillary World Champion, Norma Mound of Texas. And in the state category, Karen Wright of Georgia won steak with a perfect score, the second perfect score with a world championship, second to Ken Perkins, our buddy. And congratulations. Brian, I want to talk real quick. I know we're getting up on time. The immediate aftermath, you are just named world champion. Talk about what that's like, sharing that moment with our barbecue family, our SCA family from all over the world. How does it feel?
It was pretty surreal, just the wait for the steak calls, So, okay, I've just been crowned world champion in ribs, but you've still got a whole event coming up that you're eligible for in the steak category. So I'm trying to keep my cool and keep focused on that and all my good mojo. But, next thing I know, awards are over and I'm standing there and you're taking a picture of me and Johnny Joseph and Ken and a couple other world champions. Everyone's got their rings. Yeah. That was just like the moment that it started to sink in of, wow, I'm forever going to say I'm a world champion. And that's pretty cool. The next day, though, that was the easiest 900-mile drive I've ever embarked on. It's a lot. Your gas foot just doesn't hurt nearly as much. Your back's not as sore when you've got good news and you're sailing home. And it was apparently wasn't that smooth sailing. The next morning we wake up and our Wolfwagon springs are broken. It's listing 20 degrees to the right. Truck won't start. I think we made it home by the skin of our teeth. But, the luck got us through enough to get us the last 900 miles back home. And what's really occurred to me since then, just from, talking to my friends and talking to my family is, sure, this is a cool thing for me and, I'll have that. But what is also really neat and really humbling is this also belongs to everybody that I've ever cooked for. All of my friends and neighbors, we cook ribs all the time. And the shop down the street that works on our vehicles, we're constantly bringing them food. Anybody basically that wants to eat barbecue, I'm game. And, ribs is one of the things that's quick and easy to pull off. And you can usually impress people. So all of those people now they're telling their friends, yeah, not only that, this guy from down the street, he just won this world championship, but I've had his ribs. I helped him develop those flavors. I voted on which was better, this one or that one. And, it's just cool to be able to share it with my immediate community, share it with you, Ms. Freak, the neighborhood, and, Northwest Indiana. I'm a Hoosier now, and I'm proud to represent. So,
and for Jeff,
cool to say that Cedar Lake has a world champion in ribs.
It's very cool. And I'm so proud of you, Brian. I'm so proud of Jeff at Barbecue Pro Shop, having his factory team literally reach the top of Rib Mountain. I mean, my goodness.
Pretty exciting.
Very, very cool. So, Mr. Freak, what's next for Smoke Freaks for you after this incredible milestone?
Well, apparently we're cooking ribs in Franklin in a couple weeks. I'm dry, you're wet. But really, we're gearing up for our next in a series of classes. We've been doing classes in Europe. We've done a few more in the United States, but we've been doing classes for almost 8-9 years now, and it's something that I really, really enjoy because barbecue family is about growing your network. It's about sharing everything I know in barbecue. I pretty much learned from somebody else who was willing to share it, either through a class or advice or just, shooting the breeze around the fire before and after competitions. So sharing with other folks is really what it's all about. And I think some of my best moments are in barbecue are when somebody who's taken a class or cooked with us before writes back later and says, hey, I just had my best rib cook ever. The whole neighborhood was thrilled. Or I just won my first rib competition. And, that's really what it's all about, giving back. So next up for us, we're going to do some very, very intimate, small rib classes at our home in Cedar Lake. We've done classes as big as 30, 40 people. I much prefer the smaller format where you can be super hands-on, and that's exactly what this class is going to be. We're going to limit these to 6 students in each class. It's going to be super hands-on in that you're cooking your own ribs. We're going to help you develop the flavor profile that you're going to run, and ultimately, you all are going to compare what you guys are doing to the world champion cooks that we do, and you'll get to taste everything kind of side by side and learn the whole process. Yeah. You'll use our process, our equipment. We supply all the ribs. You just show up with an appetite and an eagerness to learn, and I guarantee you will come away a awesome rib cook.
Yeah, folks are going to trim their own ribs. Folks are going to season their own ribs. Folks are going to be responsible for.
Yeah, you're running pits.
You're running
doing everything. And I think that is the best way to learn, and the way that I've made the most out of a lot of the classes and learning experiences I've had. In fact, our whole entree into the steak world started with a very small, I'd say even private class from 2 of the best in the business, Tim and Sandy. And because of that, we were able to go out and find pretty much instant success. We weren't winning comps right away, but we were getting calls. We got our golden tickets every year. And, you know, that's how you help grow the sport. You pay it forward, you give it back. And that's what this class is going to be all about. And I guarantee it will be a very, very amazing experience. That's what Ann and I are all about, is putting on top-notch hospitality. So sign up. You'll see.
That's a great deal, too.
Thank you, Mr. Freak, and thank you, Jeff. Any final questions? We're a little bit over time, I think.
We're always over time. There's always so much to talk.
We're always over time. It's hard. I'm going to scroll through these questions real quick, see if we've got everything. Any final advice, Mr. Freak, as I scroll here for people starting out on their barbecue journey? Or
know your equipment, number 1. Number 2, cook when the weather's bad. Number 3, pick those ribs from the grocery store. If you can figure out how to make those taste good, then you're going to be fine.
Hey, that's the same advice that I'd give anybody on steak, right? Go to that grocery store, pick that crappiest steak that you can find, and
cook in a blizzard, cook in the rain, cook when it's 110 degrees, and cook as often as you can.
Well, thank you, Mr. Freak. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody.
And congratulations to you both.
Huge
accomplishment.
I can't wait to get back on the other side of the microphone, though. I like being the one asking questions.
Thank you for being in the hot seat. Hope you had a good time. Hope I was okay on you. I think I was.
Thanks for going easy on me, Ms. Freak.
All right. Well, congratulations.
See everybody in a couple of weeks.
Freak. See you all in a couple of weeks. Thank you, Jeff, for all the flavors, all the support. You and Gretchen have been amazing all these years.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.